In the Kobol village, found in the Darbhanga district of the Indian province of Bihar, the Musahar were a caste of people named for catching and eating rats. They were even poorer than the untouchables. They survived by sharpening one end of a wooden stick and poking small holes inside a farmer's field where the rats would intuitively collect grain for them. Occasionally one would fall into the hole and get stuck and die. When the Musafars would come to collect their grains from the small holes, they would find the dead rats and eat them too. They've lived in this area for over 150 years. This is their story. Savitri was the darkest and youngest of her 4 sisters. Her name was a very common one given to many baby girls. In Hindi it meant a ray of light, or hymn, and was related to Devi, the Hindu goddess, the embodiment of female energy, of Shiva, the destroyer, one of the 3 chief divinities of Hinduism. She had grown up swinging from trees and chasing her siblings throughout the wild, and was told to never do 2 things: wander into the village or play near the train tracks. Her mother's name, Fulan, meant blossoming flower, and she passed on her love of flowers to Savitri, who would sit in front of the Kaknar flowers, often when she was just an infant, and stare into them, imagining herself in miniature, hopping from petal to petal. When she had turned 8 years old, her mother wanted to show her how to fetch food. She thought she was old enough to learn. Fulan took Savitri by hand and waited till the sun went down and darkness filled the air. They would rustle through the wild until they stopped in front of Thakur Sahib's field. Fulan blocked Savitri's mouth so she would remain silent. They carefully surveyed the area to make sure the farmers had all left. Fulan took the hand of her half-naked daughter and walked into the fields with her back bent, examining the ground. Savitri's eyes adjusted quickly to the moonlight, and suddenly, what it revealed to her was little silos of food gathered by her rat foot soldiers. She smiled, and her eyes grew wide as she saw her mother thrust her hand into the bounty of grains and pull out a dead rat. Tomorrow night would be the first night she'd be allowed to go and collect on her own. The small village that Savitri lived in had no running water or electricity. In fact, she did not even know of the existence of these 2 modern inventions. Her village was located many miles from the train tracks, and she had been warned about the huge metal monster that rode those tracks and that loved severing the arms and legs of Musahar children. She had never seen a train or had the desire to. Musahar families were never allowed to attend school. They were on the lowest rung of the caste system and lived an invisible life. They feared the civilized world and preferred to hunt at night, never to be seen. Guided by the light of the moon, their skin as dark as the night sky, their eyes powerful enough to see their bounty stuffed inside the earth by rats. As the sun went down, Fulan had prepared a meal of snails and small fish she had found in the wetlands. She wanted Savitri to eat up and have some strength for her first outing to collect the dead rats and their offerings of grains. Savitri finished her meal quickly and waited for the full moon to guide her. Her mother kissed her on her head and whispered a prayer into her ears to bless her on her first journey. She blew the prayers into her ear and asked the deities to protect her daughter and return her home safely. Meanwhile, Thakur Sahib summoned his servants. He was excited to have a few of his best friends coming to see him on this full moon night, and he asked that they prepare a place in the fields to receive them. His servants pitched a small tent in the fields and loaded it with libations, mainly sora, a strong beer made of fermented grains. As Thakur Sahib's guests arrived, he greeted them with much excitement, and they all proceeded to the tent in the fields. The fevered festivities commenced. Savitri approached Thakur Sahib's field with a wild excitement. This voyage would be her initiation, her rite of passage, and she felt her mother's gaze flying over her with pride and avarice, waiting for her to bring some food to feed the entire family. As Savitri approached the field, she saw a beautiful multicolored tent in the distance. It looked like a giant flower, one that she had never seen before. Her curiosity swelled, and she wanted to take a closer look at what was inside. She could hear loud laughter as she snuck closer to it. She wondered why these village folk were in the field so late at night, and why they were laughing so loud. When she came close enough to the tent, she looked in. She noticed Thakur Sahib right away, for he was the fattest of them all. He sat shirtless, with only a lungi, and guzzled his drink, swaying back and forth in throes of passion and excitement. Savitri was surprised at the sight of these men. She had never seen a group of people acting so strange. She wondered if it was what they were drinking in copious amounts that was making them act crazier and crazier, laughing and screaming without any regard for the rest of the jungle. She remembered seeing a parrot once, falling off of trees in dizzy spells, acting the same way. Her mother had told her that the parrots were drunken from a strange, foul-smelling, rotten red nectar. When Savitri decided she had had enough of these foolish, parrot-like drunkards, she got up to go back to the fields for her first harvest. She stood up and suddenly felt a man's hand wrap around her arm violently. "Thakur Sahib, look what I have found! A bloody musahar! Shall we eat her or feed her to the rats?" asked his servant, as he cackled with an eruption of intoxicated evil laughter. Savitri tried to fight back with all her might, but was no match for this man. Her 8-year-old body shuffled back and forth, but the man had his hands locked around both arms. Now she couldn't escape. Thakur Sahib gazed at Savitri with a look that she had never seen, and it terrified her. His eyes examined her from head to toe. He smiled a sinister smile and licked his inebriated lips. "Bring her to me, but take off all her rags." The servant struggled a bit until another one came to help him. They held her arms and legs as she tried with all her might to wriggle free. They spoke slurred in a language she found difficult to understand. As she feared for her very life, a third servant approached with a huge sword and tore her rags off. She was naked, and her body pinned down by 2 men. She screamed in hopes that someone in the jungle would hear her cries, but no one came. Thakur Sahib, his guests, and servants took their turns violating the poor Savitri. She had lost her voice from shouting as loud as she could. When they had finished with her, they threw her into the fields and went back to festivities. "Give her back to the rats," Thakur Sahib commanded. Savitri sank into the fields, her eyes filled with tears and blood. Burning with rage, she felt the power of all the young rat eaters who had been raped and killed before her, and she pulled her ravaged body up and looked to the moon. Beneath her feet, she saw the little holes filled with grain. She reached her hand inside and pulled out a suffocating rat, clinging to its dear life. She stared into its eyes and bit its head off and spat it out, revolted by the fresh taste, relieving it of its suffering. She stared at its body as it twitched in her hands and began eating it, her mouth full of blood and meat. She felt her reckoning was about to begin. Slowly but surely, Thakur Sahib and his servants were getting so drunk that they began passing out and falling asleep. Savitri waited outside of the tent. She snuck up close enough to peer into the gate and saw her violators one by one fall into a slumber. She quickly noticed the blade that they had used to remove her clothing. It was cast aside on the floor next to the opening of the tent, within her grasp. As the last of the servants passed out, she snuck into the tent and grabbed the blade. With all her might, she sprung silently into the air and began slicing each of their throats. The sound of choking and gargling filled the air as their blood flowed like a mighty river. She approached Thakur Sahib, and their eyes met as she grabbed his head and severed his jugular. She smiled as his body was drained of life. She grabbed Sahib's lifeless body and began dismembering it. It took all of her strength as she cracked ligaments and tendons and hacked away with the sword. She collected all the dismembered arms in a pile. Now it was time for the heads. The fire from the torches had gone out. All that was left was the unforgiving moon, shining down on her black, sinewy body. She would covered in blood. 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 She tore a piece of cloth from the tent and decided it was time to adorn herself with her bounty. She tied each of the severed arms onto the torn cloth and wove a garment for her to tie around her waist. She spun in circles and felt the warm air swirl around her newly made dress. She collected the heads and tied their hairs together and threw them around her neck. It was the first necklace she had ever made. The sun began to rise. As Savitri walked out of the tent, she looked onto the fields and began walking in the opposite direction. She knew not where she was going, but she wanted to be as far away as possible. She feared what her mother would say and the beating that might follow. She walked with the limbs dangling around her skinny legs, their lifeless fingers caressing every little hole in the ground. She reached the train tracks and heard the train whistle loudly in her ears. She stood there stunned by the loud shriek of the brakes as the train came to a halting stop. She had never seen the great metal monster before and stood in front of it, stunned. The conductor of the train could not believe his eyes. He took off his hat and quickly climbed down from the train. His eyes stared at Savitri in utter disbelief. The passengers sitting atop of the train's roof began leaping off to get a look for themselves. The other passengers opened their windows and popped their heads out in wonder. There she was, poor Savitri, the sun bearing down on her, with her necklace of human heads and a dress of severed arms around her waist. Suddenly a murmur was heard. The witnesses began saying her name, Savitri, under their breath. It was the only word that came to their lips. They thought they were staring at a goddess. They did not know that it was in fact her real name. Savitri felt 1,000 eyes cast upon her naked 8-year-old body and began to shake as she yelled from the top of her lungs, Ninhan Savitri! Behold John! I am Savitri, you sister fuckers! The witnesses' mouths widened in disbelief as Savitri ran back into the jungle, never to be heard or seen again. I am Savitri!
When you put me down without a sound, how will the world ever know? When my judgment day seems like it's gone astray, who'll be the keeper of my soul? Who'll be the keeper of my soul? Who'll be the keeper of my soul? My baby, my babies, my baby's love. My baby, my babies, my baby's love. When the borders will be drowned by the unforgiving sound of the people tied and bound, will the world ever know? When you call me out without a shout, how will the world ever know? When the corpses rot in abandoned parking lots, who'll be the keeper of their souls? Who'll be the keeper of their souls? Who'll be the keeper of their souls? When the forgers sign our names, and what's left is who's to blame? From my wrath they'll wring the shame. Who will remember my name? My baby, my baby's love. She is the keeper of my soul. My baby's. She is the keeper of my soul. She is the keeper of my soul. She is the keeper of my soul.